back in 2012, he'd gone back to do a PhD. Obviously, a PhD is pretty intense. And he found that just the volume of reading was crazy. And he saw people really, some of his peers really stressed out, people dropping out just because of the sheer volume. And at the time, there were loads of discovery services. So, things like Web of Science and Scopus that would help you. If you put in a search term, it would return a bunch of articles that could be relevant. And so there were loads of those services and more open access services growing all the time. But there was nothing that would actually help you once you'd found a collection of articles to then distill those into, a set of papers that are going to be most relevant and useful to your research. So that was really where the idea came from. Sort of vision was that individual students would, and academics and maybe career researchers would sign up and use the technology. But in the early days, we also thought that we would be licensing Scholarcy to organisations, so maybe to other software companies, and particularly to research discovery services. And the idea was that they would plug the API in and that they could generate short synopses for, large collections of articles and display those on their website. Selling licenses into organisations was tricky. It was difficult to find the right person that would have accountability for that. And there was still at the time, back in 2019, some kind of nervousness around using this technology. And so to cut a long story short, we just decided that it wasn't going to be a viable business model. And we really started sort of honing our focus on the academic space, on students, academics and researchers. The majority of our users are in 18 to 34 age range. They really range from undergrad right through to master's, PhD, and then early career researchers. So it's a real mix. And the tool kind of adapts to those different types of students. So it can be useful for a new undergrad getting to grips with longer texts or complex texts and take some of that anxiety away. But for more advanced students, for PhD students, it can really help in, going back to the point about Phil, in really just reducing the cognitive load and figuring out more easily which papers are going to be most useful to your work and your research. So it's kind of got a range of applications, and we see that reflected really in the audience. I think it was early 2020. It was around the time of the first COVID lockdown, and that's when we saw the first surge in subscribers. At that point, we were still attempting to sell site licenses into universities through the library, but similarly to the other business-to-business model, it was a tricky sell. Librarians didn't have the budget. Their budgets were kind of reserved for content packages, and they really didn't have anything much left over for software services outside of referencing tools. But around that same time, we saw individual students coming to us more and just subscribing and paying for Scholarcy themselves. So we knew that there was demand, and we started to realise that actually maybe the route is just direct to those students rather than through the institution or the library. At the moment, there's a range of different file formats that you can import into Scholarcy. So it could be a Word document, PDF, the link to an open access article, plain text doesn't really matter what the source is. And that's always going to generate this consistent Scholarcy flashcard. And on the output side, you can export to a range of file formats. That could be Excel, could be Word, PowerPoint. And again, that makes it more adaptable to other services. So if, for example, I export my flashcards to Markdown, I can then import those results into something like Roam or Obsidian, those kind of second brain tools. And that can give me a nice knowledge network. So, the information from Scholarcy I export, and then it's represented nicely in another application. We have integrated directly with some other applications, Zotero being the main one. So people who have a Zotero account can now pull papers directly in from their library into Scholarcy and again generate the flashcard. I guess our approach in terms of tools like ChatGPT is to use some of that underlying technology to enhance what we can give students in Scholarcy. So we use some third-party LLMs, and we use those to enhance the Scholarcy summary. So the way that the technology works in Scholarcy is that you import a paper, you generate the flashcard, and that gives you its extractive summarization. So whatever you see in the flashcard, you're going to be able to trace back to the original text. So we're not really in any huge way kind of rewording or paraphrasing. And that's why we really present ourselves as a reading tool. We're not a paraphrasing tool. So you can't copy and paste and drop that text into your essay because it's going to get picked up by a plagiarism detector. But having said that, we're always looking, and Phil's always looking to improve the quality of the summaries. So we have a new enhanced summary, and that's using some of these third-party APIs, and it's enabling us to offer users, they can select the type of summary that they want to see. So they might just want a one-liner, they might want a few bullet points, they might want a longer sort of more narrative synopsis. What we're doing is taking the extracted text, the extracted summary, running it through some of these third-party APIs and generating this enhanced summary that is intended to make, it easier for users to read and understand the text and to get a good sense of the contents of the paper. I mean, one thing that Scholarcy can do is get you started with your writing. The way it can be useful for, say, an undergrad writing an essay is that they have their course material, they've uploaded it over the term or the semester into Scholarcy, and now they need to write on a particular subject and they need to refer back to all of these articles and chapters. If they're pulling statements from the original research paper, they're obviously going to be quoting and citing that paper. So that's kind of how we see its application. In terms of the summarization itself, it's a constant ongoing process. So Phil is continually working to improve the summarization models and tweaking those also based on user feedback. So, we get a lot of feedback from subscribers saying, I really like this aspect, this summary's not working for me. And we take all of that on board and use that to just iteratively improve the summaries. So we really rely on our subscribers as well to give us feedback, and we've got thumbs up, thumbs down on the summary as well. So we've kind of broadened our proposition quite a bit now to make Scholarcy more of a learning tool. So it's not just about reading, it's about understanding, it's about applying knowledge to your own work. And we really, our aim, and we're getting there, is to make Scholarcy really just an essential part of any student's toolkit. So alongside a reference manager, you're using Scholarcy either to import the search results and build up your library that way, or you're exporting your flashcards to a reference file that you can then manage within your reference manager. So I think we want it to be, just an integral part of the student's toolkit. And we're seeing that happen. We've got a global audience. Our biggest user base is in the US. We're seeing growth in India and Africa, particularly in terms of the free application. Our subscribers are growing month on month very healthily, so we just want to continue in that direction.